Welcome to the deep dive. You send us infinitelife.pdf, a really fascinating read, and we've dived right in.
We certainly have.
And our mission today is to trace the incredible evolutionary journey of the egg. The book uses it as this amazing lens, doesn't it? Reframing pretty much the whole history of animal life.
It really does. It's quite a perspective shift. It covers this vast sweep of time, from Earth's early days right up to now, and the egg is always sort of center stage.
Exactly. I love the bit at the start about frog spawn in a tank, that gelatinous blob.
Yeah.
It seems so simple, but it's a great way in, realizing how much history is packed into something like that.
A perfect jumping off point.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning, way before eggs. What was Earth like when life first got going?
Oh, picture this, like 4.5 billion years ago. It's just chaos.
Huh.
A condensing cloud of space dust and debris, constant bombardment by rocks, ice, just incredibly violent.
Sounds pretty rough.
Yeah.
Not exactly hospitable. Not at all. But crucially, that chaos delivered the goods, Metals, the basis for proteins, arrived on meteorites. And water, tons of it, probably came from icy comets.
So the raw materials arrived violently, and that led to...
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Oceans started to form, the atmosphere began to develop, weather systems kicked off. But life, for a very, very long time, was purely microscopic. No animals, certainly no eggs yet.
Right, we're talking tiny, tiny organisms. How far back does the evidence go for that early life?
We're looking at maybe 3 billion years ago, possibly even more. Things like biogenic graphite, basically, carbon signatures left by life, and these strange carbon patterns inside ancient garnet crystals.
Wow, 3 billion years. So even we get things like stromatolites,
Yeah.
those bacterial mats.
Yeah, those layered structures built by microbes, and even later, when cyanobacteria started pumping out oxygen, changing the whole atmosphere, still no eggs. The world belonged to microbes for an incredibly long time.
It's kind of mind-boggling. Life without eggs seems so alien now. So when do we see the first hint, the first sort of proto-egg maybe? Well, the book points to something really interesting found by paleontologists, scientists who study ancient microscopic fossils, like pollen and spores. They've found these fossilized resting cysts from early microorganisms.
Resting cysts, like a survival strategy.
Exactly. Think of them as dormant pods, a way to wait out tough conditions. Some have incredibly complex surfaces, really ornate, and the idea is these might be linked to modern organisms like dinoflagellates, the ones that sometimes cause red tides.
Okay, so a protected dormant stage, a kind of precursor idea maybe, a step towards enclosing life.
Possibly, yeah. It's a potential evolutionary stepping stone, a way to package life up, keep it safe. But it's still a long way from an animal egg.
Right, so moving from those microscopic cysts to actual animal eggs, it's a huge jump. How does the book chart that transition?
It takes us forward to the Ediacaran period. This is when we see the first larger, more complex, often quite bizarre, soft-bodied life forms. There are amazing fossils from places like the IR Plateau in Namibia. They call it the Ediacaran Garden.
Ah, the weird and wonderful Ediacaran fauna.
Exactly, and the book uses jellyfish as a kind of before animal example. Their reproduction is relatively simple, often involving budding or simple release of sex cells. The big evolutionary flashpoint, the book argues, was the development of distinct, free-swimming sperm and a larger, nutrient-rich, less mobile egg.
Okay, sperm and egg.
Yeah.
Seems fundamental now, but why was that specific development such a big deal evolutionarily?
Well, it ties into the whole puzzle of why sex evolved in the first place. I mean, think about it. You only pass on half your genes. Why bother?
Good question. It seems less efficient, in a way.
Right. And the book highlights a leading, if slightly ugly hypothesis: parasites.
Parasites, how do they fit in?
If you reproduce asexually, all your offspring are clones. If a parasite evolves to target you, it can wipe out your entire lineage because everyone has the same vulnerability. Sex shuffles the genetic deck every generation.
Ah, creating diversity. So each offspring is slightly different, a moving target for parasites.
Precisely. It's like a constant evolutionary arms race. Yeah. And the egg is central here. The book uses sea urchins as a great example. Their eggs have this amazing protective coat, the zona pellucida.
Zona pellucida. What does that do?
It's made of glycoproteins, proteins with sugars attached, and it acts like a very specific lock. Only sperm from the same species with the right molecular key can bind to it and fertilize the egg. It ensures you're mixing genes with the right partner.
So a sophisticated recognition system right on the egg's surface.
Yeah.
Key takeaway then is that sex, driven perhaps by parasites, led to this specialized egg and sperm system.
Absolutely. It was a foundation for much of the animal diversity that followed.
Okay, so we've got sex, sperm, and the specialized egg. What's the next major chapter in the egg's story, according to the source? It mentions something about internal specialization and even mortality.
Yeah, this is another fundamental split. Very early in the development of most animal embryos, the cells commit to one of two fates: becoming soma cells, which make up the body muscles, nerves, skin, everything else, or becoming germ cells, the ones set aside to eventually produce eggs or sperm.
So body cells and reproductive cells are separated right from the start.
In most animals, yes. Compare that again to something like a jellyfish. They have amazing regenerative abilities. They can often produce eggs from various body cells using stem cells. They don't have that strict early separation.
Why did that separation evolve then? What's the advantage?
There are a few hypotheses. One idea is that separating the germline early protects it from mutations that might accumulate in the body cells during life. You want the reproductive blueprint kept safe, right? Another thought is it might allow the body parts, the soma, to evolve and specialize more quickly without messing up the germ cells.
Keep the inheritance clean, basically.
Mm.
And how does this connect to, well, us not living forever?
The book brings in mitochondria here, the powerhouses in our cells. Remember, you inherit your mitochondria almost exclusively from your mother's egg. There's no mixing from the sperm's mitochondria.
Right, maternal inheritance.
So this unique inheritance might have also played a role in favoring that early germline separation. But the consequence of separating off these mortal body cells, the soma, from the potentially immortal germline, well, it means our bodies have a finite lifespan. Our soma cells aren't designed to go on forever.
Wow. So our individual mortality is, in a sense, baked into this ancient evolutionary decision tied to how eggs and sperm develop. That's quite a thought.
It really is a profound consequence of this early specialization.
Okay, so from specialized cells to mortality. The egg's influence is deep. What about practical innovations? How did eggs themselves change? The book talks about egg care next.
Yes, the next big leap, highlighted from the Cambrian period, think Burgess shale fossils, is the shift away from just broadcast spawning, shedding eggs and sperm into the water, and hoping for the best.
Which must have been incredibly wasteful and risky.
Hugely risky. Instead, we see the beginnings of parental care, or at least placement. Attaching eggs to surfaces, keeping them somewhat protected. A major threat in shallow water back then would have been the sun's UV radiation.
Ah, sunburn for eggs. How did they cope?
Evolution came up with some clever molecular solutions. Organisms started packing their eggs with natural sunscreen molecules, things called mycosporine-like amino acids, or MAAs. These absorb harmful UV light.
So mothers provisioned their eggs with sunscreen.
Essentially, yes. These compounds are actually found all over the place, even in cyanobacteria, so they're ancient. On top of that, eggs evolved antioxidant proteins like glutathione and ovathiol to mop up damaging free radicals caused by any UV that did get through.
So attaching eggs and giving them chemical protection, that's a significant step up in survival chances.
Definitely. It shows this increasing investment in each individual egg, moving away from sheer numbers towards quality and protection.
Okay, so eggs are getting more sophisticated, better protected, but they're still mostly in the water at this point, right?
Yeah.
What about the big move onto land? That must have posed huge challenges for the egg.
Oh, enormous challenges. Water-based eggs out of water face two huge problems: drying out, desiccation, and getting enough oxygen. The book discusses how early land animals, like millipedes, started to tackle the fertilization part first.
Also?
Millipedes evolved specialized legs called gonopods to transfer sperm directly, and many early land arthropods, like arachnids, developed spermatophores.
Spermatophores, like little sperm packages.
Exactly. Instead of releasing free-swimming sperm, which would dry out instantly on land, the male produces a packet of sperm, sometimes on a stalk, creating these little sperm gardens for the female to pick up. Scorpions still do this. The spermatophore protects the sperm from drying out.
Clever. So solving the sperm delivery problem first. What about the female side?
Females, particularly in arachnids, evolved spermathecae internal storage organs. They could store the sperm, sometimes for long periods, and control when fertilization happened.
So internal storage, timed fertilization. But the egg itself still faced the drying out problem on land.
Precisely. And the oxygen problem. An egg needs to breathe, exchange gases. Land eggs evolved pores in their outer layers to allow oxygen in and carbon dioxide out while trying to minimize water loss. It's a delicate balance.
A breathable but water-resistant shell. That sounds like the precursor to something major.
It absolutely is. It's leading us towards the amniotic egg, arguably one of the most important evolutionary inventions for life on land.
The amniotic revolution. Okay, tell us about that. This allowed vertebrates to finally conquer the land, reproductively speaking.
Totally. It's what allowed reptiles, birds, and eventually mammals to break their ties with water for reproduction. The key innovation, likely evolving first in animals living in damp soil or burrows, wasn't just a shell, but a series of internal membranes within the egg.
Right, I remember this from biology. There's several layers.
Four key ones.
Yeah.
You've got the amnion, which creates a fluid-filled sac immediately around the embryo, its own private pond, basically, protecting it from shock and drying out.
The embryo's personal swimming pool.
Okay.
Then the allantois, which handles gas exchange getting oxygen in, CO2 out, and also stores metabolic waste. The yolk sac, obviously, contains the food supply. And finally, the chorion surrounds everything else, also involved in gas exchange through the shell. Some groups, like birds and reptiles, also add albumin, the egg white, for extra water and protein.
So it's like a self-contained life support system. And the shell.
The shell provides physical protection and, crucially, has pores for that gas exchange managed by the allantois and chorion. But it's important to note the earliest amniote shells were probably quite thin, maybe leathery or flexible, not like a hard chicken egg.
Interesting. So it wasn't instantly a hard shell, and this whole setup allowed for bigger eggs, bigger embryos on land.
Yes, that was a huge advantage. Think about fish or amphibian eggs. They're often jelly-like. The surface area limits how much oxygen can diffuse in, which puts a cap on how big the egg and the embryo can get. The internal membranes of the amniotic egg solve this gas exchange problem, allowing for much larger terrestrial eggs and therefore larger hatchlings. Removes a major size constraint. And internal fertilization must be essential for this kind of egg, right? You need to fertilize it before the shell goes on.
Absolutely. Internal fertilization is prerequisite. And the book touches on the surprising origins of the structures involved, like the penis, which apparently evolved initially from limb precursors in early amniotes, and later from tail precursors in mammals. Lizards and snakes, of course, have hemipins.
Wow, evolution repurposing body parts again. So the amniotic egg fundamentally shifted reproduction from water to land.
Completely. It's the key to vertebrates truly conquering terrestrial environments.
While vertebrates were figuring out the amniotic egg, what were insects doing? They obviously cracked the land problem too. Did their eggs undergo a similar revolution?
They did, in their own way. During the Carboniferous period, the age of giant insects and lush coal forests insects were incredibly successful. A big part of that success was the evolution of an egg covering called the serosa.
The serosa. What did that do?
It's this amazing membrane secreted by the early embryo that sits just inside the outer shell, the chorion. The serosa is fantastic at retaining water, but also allowing oxygen to pass through. Think of it like insect Gore-Tex for their eggs.
Oh, insect Gore-Tex. I like that. So it solved the drying out and breathing problem.
It really did. Compare them to something like silverfish. Their eggs still need damp environments. But the serosa allowed the ancestors of most modern insects to lay eggs in much drier places, opening up vast new habitats. This likely fueled their incredible diversification.
Makes sense. And the insect egg itself, structure-wise.
It's quite sophisticated. You have the outer chorion, often sculpted or patterned, which usually has tiny pores, kind of aerobials for gas exchange, and a specific little pore, the microbial, where the sperm enters before the egg is laid. Inside that, you have waterproofing lipoprotein layers, sometimes sticky layers to glue the egg down.
A complex little package. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, don't they?
Oh, incredibly diverse. Spindles, spheres, barrels, some with elaborate spines or flanges. Really amazing variety.
Okay, so amniotes and insects have cracked terrestrial reproduction with specialized eggs. But then evolution throws another curveball. Live birth, viviparity. How does that emerge from an egg-laying world?
The book points to the Permian period for some early evidence, particularly in reptiles. Fossils of mesosaurs, these small aquatic reptiles, have been found with embryos inside the adult body cavity.
Suggesting they weren't laying eggs.
Exactly. It strongly suggests they were retaining the eggs internally, maybe until hatching, or even providing nourishment internally. We see similar paths later in marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, and even in many sharks today. Holding onto the eggs internally seems to be a recurring theme, especially in aquatic environments.
Why would that be advantageous in water? Maybe protection from predators eating the eggs.
That's certainly one possibility. Temperature regulation could be another, keeping the developing embryos at a stable body temperature. The Permian also saw other egg-related innovations, like insects evolving gall making, where they induced plants to form protective structures around their eggs, and more parasitic egg-laying strategies.
A lot happening in the Permian. But it ends dramatically, doesn't it?
It ends with the biggest mass extinction event in Earth's history, the Great Dying. Wiped out something like 95% of marine species and 70% of land vertebrate families. Trilobites gone, sea scorpions gone.
But insects seem to weather it relatively well,
hmm
related to their eggs again.
The book suggests yes. They're adaptable, resilient eggs, possibly laid in diverse protected microhabitats, likely help them pull through better than many other groups.
Resilience through egg evolution. Okay, so after the Permian devastation, we enter the Triassic. What's happening with eggs then?
Well, amphibians actually had a bit of a resurgence initially, filling ecological gaps. Their jelly-like eggs continued to be refined. There are sites like the Lamy amphibian quarry showing this short-lived amphibian dominance. But the Triassic really becomes the age of reptiles, specifically the archosaurs, the lineage leading to crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds, and also the therapsids.
The rhapsids, those are the ancestors of mammals, right?
That's them, the proto-mammals. And they were actually doing pretty well in the Triassic. They likely laid eggs, probably soft-shelled ones like modern monotremes, maybe in burrows or hidden spots. But they were already developing key mammalian traits, possibly hair, specialized teeth.
So early mammal ancestors were egg layers. How did we get from that to, well, us?
The thinking is that increasing competition and predation from the rising archosaurs pushed these proto-mammals towards becoming smaller, possibly nocturnal. Fur would help with staying warm at night, and developing milk would allow them to provision small, helpless young born from those eggs without needing to find tiny bits of food constantly.
Ah, so nocturnality, fur, milk, all developing alongside egg laying initially.
It seems so. Then another extinction event at the end of the Triassic hit the larger reptiles harder, perhaps giving these small, adaptable, potentially egg-protecting proto-mammals an edge, pushing them further down that path. Maybe retaining the eggs internally for longer became more advantageous.
Leading eventually towards the placenta.
Exactly. The Jurassic period seems to have been a time of lots of reproductive experimentation in these early mammals. And this is where the true placenta evolves in the lineage leading to us, the placental mammals.
The placental advantage. What did it offer over even a well-protected egg?
It offers intimate internal protection, of course, but also continuous nourishment drawn directly from the mother, efficient waste removal, and gas exchange, all managed by this dedicated organ.
The placenta as a supermembrane.
Pretty much. The book describes the human placenta, this complex organ formed from both maternal and fetal tissues. It's an endocrine powerhouse, too, producing hormones like HCG to maintain the pregnancy, progesterone, estrogen. It manages the whole internal environment for the developing baby.
It's an incredible structure. Is it unique to mammals?
The highly invasive, complex placenta of placental mammals is pretty special, yes. But placenta-like structures, where the mother provides nourishment beyond the yolk, have evolved independently many times. We see them in some sharks, lizards, fish. Even that ancient fossil fish Metarpiches showed evidence of internal nourishment. Jurassic marine reptiles might have used them too.
So the basic idea of nourishing young internally isn't exclusively mammalian. Why did it become so central for us?
For mammals in the Jurassic, perhaps retaining the developing young internally offered better temperature control in a world dominated by large, possibly cooler-blooded dinosaurs. Maybe it wasn't just about predators. And it seems the genetic pathways to form these placental bonds might be easier to evolve than we used to think.
Easier to evolve. Interesting. But this close connection must have downsides too.
Oh, yes. The book mentions the idea of parent-offspring conflict. Because the fetus is directly tapping into the mother's resources via the placenta, there's an evolutionary tug-of-war over how much resource is allocated. It's an intimate but potentially costly connection for the mother.
A biological negotiation. What about other mammal groups? Marsupials took a different route.
They did. Marsupials, which also diverged in the Mesozoic, went for a strategy with a very short-lived, less complex placental connection. Their young are born extremely underdeveloped, tiny, and have to make a perilous journey to the pouch to latch onto a nipple and complete their development there.
Two different successful mammalian strategies. And birds. They stuck with the egg, but perfected it, right?
Absolutely perfected it. The book details the incredible journey of a bird egg through the oviduct. The yolk is released, then layers of albumin egg white packed with water. Proteins like lysozyme for antibacterial defense are added. Then, in the isthmus, the shell membranes form a sort of foundation of collagen fibers. Finally, in the uterus or shell gland, the hard calcium carbonate shell is deposited over many hours.
An assembly line for a perfect hard-shelled egg.
Precisely. Ready for external incubation.
Now, dinosaur eggs. For a long time, people weren't even sure they laid eggs, were they?
Right. It seems obvious now, but the first confirmed nests and eggs, found famously by Roy Chapman Andrews in Mongolia in the 1920s, were a huge discovery. Initially mistaken for Protoceratops eggs, they later turned out to be Oviraptor.
And we now know dinosaur eggs came in lots of shapes and sizes.
Huge diversity. Spherical, elongated like bird eggs, some almost bizarrely shaped, and many had unique shell ornamentation nodes, ridges, intricate line patterns.
What was the point of the fancy patterns? Just decoration?
Probably not just decoration. The hypotheses range from structural strength, maybe helping prevent cracks, to potentially aiding gas exchange through complex pore systems integrated with the ornamentation. Laying all those eggs also required huge amounts of calcium, especially in the Cretaceous.
And egg color in birds, the book links that evolution to dinosaurs too.
Well, indirectly. The leading idea for why bird eggs evolved such varied colors and patterns, blues, greens, speckles, is actually linked to brood parasitism.
Nest cheating. Like cuckoos.
Exactly. If another bird tries to dump its eggs in your nest, having distinctively patterned eggs helps you recognize and reject the intruder's eggs. This evolutionary pressure likely drove the diversification of egg appearance, perhaps starting among bird-like dinosaurs.
An evolutionary signature to spot fakes.
Yeah.
Clever. And hatching. It's not just about pecking out, is it?
No, it's a highly coordinated process, especially in birds. Just before hatching, the chick needs to switch from getting oxygen via the shell membranes to breathing air. Blood vessels to the membranes shut down. The remaining yolk is absorbed into the belly. The umbilicus seals up. Then it breaks into the airspace at the blunt end of the egg, takes its first breath, and then starts the effort of pipping and breaking out.
A complex internal sequence before the Great Escape. Okay, fast forward past the dinosaurs. We're into the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. The placenta really comes into its own.
It really does. Placental mammals diversify incredibly, filling niches left vacant by the dinosaurs. The book reflects on this, mentioning the grandmother figure, the sort of evolutionary wisdom embodied in birth. And it emphasizes just how unique the placental mammal placenta is, particularly its invasiveness in many groups, burrowing deep into the uterine wall.
Invasive. How so?
In humans and rodents, for example, the placental tissues directly contact the mother's bloodstream. It's a very intimate but also energetically demanding and potentially risky connection. Other mammals, like horses or cows, have less invasive placentas where more tissue layers remain between mother and fetus.
And does that difference matter?
There seems to be a correlation. The book suggests that mammals with less invasive placentas tend to have faster development, shorter lifespans, kind of a live fast, die young strategy compared to the longer gestation and often longer lives associated with more invasive placentas.
Interesting trade-off. And brain size. Does the placenta link to that explosion in mammal brain size during the Cenozoic?
That's a really intriguing idea raised in the book. Could the intense physiological demands and the intimate connection of an invasive placenta have been a driving factor in the evolution of larger, more complex brains in mammals? Coping with that internal negotiation, managing longer development. It's a fascinating hypothesis.
Wow, the placenta as a brain driver. Okay, bringing us towards the present day, the Anthropocene, how does the book view the egg in our current world?
It paints a picture of eggs distributed across the globe. Amphibians still tied to water, reptile eggs mostly in soil or sand, bird eggs in nests almost everywhere, and mammal eggs developing internally within placentas. And of course, it acknowledges our own species' profound impact, driven by our reproductive success and those large brains.
And our impact is affecting eggs now, isn't it? Climate change.
Definitely. The book highlights how changing temperatures are causing shifts. Some birds are laying eggs earlier in the spring. Extreme weather events, like hurricanes washing over beaches, pose a huge threat to sea turtle nests. The timing and survival of eggs are being directly impacted.
Are any species adapting?
There are examples. Some wolf spiders apparently are managing to lay more clutches per season in warmer conditions. So there's adaptation happening, but the overall pressure on these crucial life stages is immense. The egg remains absolutely fundamental. It's the starting point for virtually all future animal life.
It really is. What an incredible journey. From microscopic resting cysts billions of years ago Through the invention of sex, the move to land with the amniotic egg and insect adaptations, the rise of internal development with placentas, all centered on this biological package.
It shaped the entire course of animal evolution: protection, nourishment, gas exchange, defense against parasites, enabling life on land. The egg, in its various forms, has been the solution again and again.
So the final thought for you, our listener, is this. Thinking about the egg's absolutely central role across billions of years, how does knowing its story change how you see life, reproduction, maybe even your own existence tied back to that ancient split between body and germ cells? The book ends with a lovely analogy, too, suggesting books are also like eggs, carrying ideas across time. Something to ponder.